5 years of marriage, and on my birthday, my wife, Willow, chose to pick up her ex instead of joining me for our dinner. But this time, when she came home, she found that I was no longer there. She thought I was just sulking, confident that I wouldn't be able to stay away from her and would eventually give in, returning to beg for her forgiveness. So, on the first day I was gone, she generously gave my room to her ex to stay in. On the second day, she realized that the huge villa felt eerily empty without me. On the third day, she found herself unable to get used to anyone else's cooking except for mine. By the fourth day, she could no longer sit still and began searching for any trace of me. That was when she finally realized there was no trace of my belongings in the house, and we had somehow, without her even noticing, already ended our marriage. It was then that panic set in, and she realized I really didn't want her anymore. Chapter 1. Explosion. Rich girl picks up ex at midnight, suspected to rekindle old flame. In the news GIF, under the heavy rain at the airport, a woman in a white dress smiles and throws herself into the arms of a man in a black suit. The man holds an umbrella, carefully tilting it over her head to shield her from the rain. I repeatedly zoom in and out of the news image, but I can't quite make out the expression on the woman's face. Just then, a voice of inquiry rings in my ears. Sir, our restaurant is about to close. Do you still wish to continue waiting? Boom. A loud thunder rumbles, and the rain intensifies. I turn my head to look outside the window, and the glass reflects an emotionless face. Today is my birthday, but I couldn't feel less happy. For this birthday, I had booked her favorite restaurant half a month in advance and spent most of the day confirming the menu with the chef. I woke up early to get ready, bringing her favorite matcha cake to the restaurant. Though it was my birthday, everything was arranged according to her preferences. Even though she hadn't come, I knew she was busy. I didn't dare to rush her, let alone disturb her. So I waited. I waited until nightfall, when the city lights began to glow. I waited while the waiter came over again and again to ask if I wanted the dishes served. I waited until the exquisite dishes turned cold. I waited until the warm feelings in my heart had faded. She still hadn't come. I looked down at the news image of that frail woman and couldn't help but let out a self-mocking smile. In 5 years of marriage, I had lost count of how many times I had waited for her. Every time, I started with high hopes, only to end in disappointment. I should have realized that once that person appeared, she would drop everything, even me, her husband of 5 years. I suddenly felt exhausted. I didn't want to wait anymore, nor did I want to maintain this one-sided marriage. I looked up and smiled at the waiter. No, I'm not waiting anymore. These dishes haven't been touched. Could I exchange them for an umbrella? In the pouring rain, I held up the umbrella and flagged down a taxi. The rain mist was thick, and as I leaned against the window, my thoughts drifted far away. I came from a poor family, and when I lost my parents at a young age, the Liu family supported me so I could attend school. After struggling and working hard to leave the mountains, I never forgot their kindness. At a charity gala, I met Willow for the first time. She sat in a high position, the lighting casting shadows on her face. Her narrow eyes held a hint of coldness, and her whole demeanor screamed, "Keep your distance." Just one glance, and I felt like I was being sucked into a vortex, my heart inexplicably racing. Seeing her nameplate on the table, I gathered the courage to approach, introduce myself, and thank her. She looked up at me, took a small sip from her champagne glass, and lazily asked, "What brings you here?" I took a deep breath and expressed, without reservation, the gratitude I felt for the Liu family's help over the years. When she heard that I was here to repay a favor, her slightly tipsy eyes scanned me from head to toe. Then she smiled lightly and said, "Repay a favor? I have no need for fame, wealth, or power, but I am lacking a man to show off. Would you be willing to offer yourself?" In that moment, I was shocked, helpless, yet somehow, I heard myself say, "Okay." No proposal, no wedding, no ring, no media coverage. We simply went to the registry office and got married. Perhaps it was too easy, which is why she never truly valued this relationship. In the 5 years of our marriage, I had always tried to get close to her heart. I thought I hadn't done enough, but later, I realized there was never a place for me. Her heart had always been reserved for one person, Makoto, her first love, a passionate affection in her youth, but it ended without a trace. He said he was going abroad, and she let him go. As for me, I was merely a quiet, suitable companion in her cold world. Now, even that companionship was no longer needed. So, what reason did I have to stay? But Willow never forgot him. I slowly realized that I had been nothing more than a tool for her to get over her past heartbreak. The day she first proposed marriage to me was the very day Makoto officially announced his wedding abroad. Our wedding house was the very villa she had once looked at with Makoto. The restaurant we chose to celebrate our wedding anniversary was the same place where she had confessed her love to Makoto for the first time. Too many coincidences made my love for her gradually fade away. Beep. The notification sound pulled me out of my thoughts. I opened my phone and saw a message from the person with a black profile picture. Something came up today. "I'll celebrate your birthday with you next year." I smiled lightly. Next year? Willow, there is no next year for us. Our marriage ends today. It was you who proposed the wedding back then. And now, it's me who is proposing the divorce. Chapter 2. The car stopped steadily in front of the villa, and the man in a black coat carefully held the umbrella while gently guiding the woman in his arms up the stairs. The front door was suddenly thrown open, and the housekeeper rushed over to take the umbrella from his hands. Willow paused, not seeing the familiar face she expected, and furrowed her brows. She didn't pass her coat to anyone. Instead, she simply draped it over her arm. "Where's Mr. Wang?" she asked. "Mr. Wang hasn't returned yet." Willow halted. It was then that she remembered today was supposed to be spent celebrating George's birthday. However, she had gotten a call from Makoto halfway through, which led her to turn around and head to the airport. She glanced out the window. The sky was as dark as unrelenting ink, and the howling northern wind carried fine raindrops. Moisture seeped through the slightly ajar window, and a chill swept through. A tinge of guilt stirred inside her. Would George be upset? But as soon as the thought emerged, she quickly dismissed it. It would be nearly impossible for George to be angry. He was always clear-headed, distinguishing right from wrong, and his words were gentle and measured. He never held grudges. These past few years, she had often muttered Makoto's name in her drunken stupor. George, however, acted as though he hadn't heard a thing. He simply made her hangover soup with his usual calm demeanor. How could he possibly be upset over such trivial matters? The housekeeper, sensing her fleeting worry, hesitated and asked, "Miss, should I call Mr. Wang?" Willow shrugged it off casually. "No need. He'll be back soon. When he comes, have him stop by the study." Then she turned softly to Makoto. "It's getting late. You can sleep in his room." Makoto looked at her with hesitation. "Isn't that a bit inappropriate? After all, that's Mr. Wang's room." She shook her head. "He won't mind." I stepped out of the taxi, holding the umbrella I had exchanged for dinner. The cold rain slid off the edges of the umbrella, forming a curtain of water that separated me from the world. But this umbrella couldn't block out the biting wind, nor could it shield me from the deepening chill in my heart. I tightened my coat around me, my fingers numb with cold as I walked for what felt like forever, finally stopping in front of a riverside apartment. Without hesitation, I signed a 6-month lease. I knew this time, I wasn't planning to go back. As soon as I closed the door behind me, the phone rang. I looked at the screen, my brows furrowing. "Makoto." I still swiped to answer. "Mr. Wang." "Hello, this is Makoto." His voice was soft, as if just steeped in warm water, fake and polite. "I heard you and Willow had some misunderstandings because of me. I'm really sorry and concerned. I think it's necessary to explain the relationship between her and me." I stood by the window, the rain pattering against the glass, sharp but irritating. "Although we dated, that was in the past. We're just friends now. I sincerely hope you two are happy and that you won't let me cause any misunderstandings. If possible, could you please give her a call? She's really worried about you." I almost laughed out loud. If Willow truly cared about me, would she really have waited until now to make a single call? She wasn't lacking resources or ability. If she wanted to find me, she could do so in an instant. And yet, I ran away from home, and the first one to call me was her ex. How ironic. I didn't want to listen to his pretentious words any longer, so I hung up the phone without hesitation. But within a few seconds, the phone rang again, call after call, persistent like a patient hunter. I held out until the last one, then finally picked up. This time, the line was oddly silent. I didn't speak, and he didn't rush to say anything, as if waiting for my patience to wear thin. Finally, he let out a low laugh. "Seems like you're not as reasonable and generous as Willow said." His voice carried a touch of contempt. "I thought you could endure more, especially after 5 years of marriage. Now you're throwing a tantrum. This is all you've got." I didn't respond, only glanced out the window. He continued, "George, running away from home won't affect her. If you were a little more perceptive and gave up your position willingly, I'd have Willow offer you some compensation." "Compensation?" I spoke softly, my tone nearly frozen. "All right." There was a brief pause on the other end, as if he hadn't expected me to agree so quickly. "What did you say?" I sat back down on the couch, my eyes lingering on the unopened cake box. I spoke softly. "Since Mr. Ito has already considered the compensation issue for me, why don't we meet and discuss the details?" I paused, a faint smile tugging at the corner of my lips. "Tomorrow morning, same place, the cafe." Chapter 3. The next morning, I didn't rush to leave. After all, he would definitely wait. Makoto was the type who thought he had the entire situation under control. He always believed that as long as he showed up, everyone would give him face, including me. By the time I walked into the cafe at my own pace, he was already seated, his expression impatient. He stirred his coffee, the cup nearly empty. I sat across from him, and before I could speak, he couldn't hold it in anymore. "Didn't we agree on 9 o'clock? You show up at this hour. Are you trying to mess with me on purpose?" I let out a scoff, my tone calm. "Yes, Mr. Ito, I'm messing with you." His face changed instantly, and he raised his hand as if to slap me. I blocked it with one hand, pushing him back with the other. He stumbled and fell back onto the sofa. The air was terrifyingly still. He glared at me, his eyes burning with anger. It seemed that in his mind, I was still the gentle, docile figure, the nominal husband who wouldn't fight back. I stared back at him, my tone still level. If you can't even sit still in Willow's husband's seat, don't rush to steal someone else's chair. It seemed like he finally realized his hasty behavior and straightened up, watching me carefully. There was confusion in his eyes. I knew he was wondering why I wasn't the man he imagined I should be. No rage, no heart-wrenching frustration, no outburst of curses. I simply sat there, like a passerby enjoying a stroll, sipping my coffee slowly. I wasn't without anger, but once you've given up, even your anger feels unnecessary. He finally calmed down, cautiously asking, "You didn't call me here just for coffee, did you?" I put down my cup, slowly taking out the divorce agreement from my bag and sliding it across the table to him. The words, "divorce agreement," were clearly printed on the front page. He froze for a moment, his eyes widening instinctively, as though he was making sure he wasn't seeing things. What do you mean?" I spoke softly. "Didn't you want me to divorce Willow? I'm agreeing to it." I paused, watching the gleam of excitement start to form on his face, nearly making me laugh out loud. "But I have two conditions. You agree to them, and once the cooling-off period ends and the divorce certificate is in hand, I'll disappear from your world without leaving a trace." He fought to suppress the smile that was threatening to break out, trying his best to remain composed. "What conditions?" I looked at him, my tone still calm. "First, I still have some personal belongings at the villa. When I send you the address, I need you to pack them up and mail them to me. Second, I've already signed this agreement. I need you to find a way to get Willow to sign it too, and she can't know that I'm the one initiating the divorce." He furrowed his brow. "Aren't you going to give it to her yourself?" I let my gaze drift toward the window, where my emotionless reflection stared back at me. I remembered many years ago, outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, when she had turned to ask me, "Are you sure this isn't just an impulsive decision?" At that time, I hadn't thought much about it. I just felt incredibly lucky that this woman, who seemed so high above me, was willing to marry me. I was eager to have her, wishing I could seal the deal right away. But over the years, I came to realize that neither fate nor love could be obtained through sheer effort. I had always known about her past with Makoto. I had thought about divorce before, but I lowered my voice, as if telling an insignificant story. Because the Liu family has a rule: children can only lose a spouse. They cannot divorce. So you see, from the very beginning, I never had a choice. Perhaps before, I still held onto a glimmer of hope, which is why I hadn't pushed forward. But now, no matter what, I was determined to get a divorce, even if I had to ask her ex for help. I didn't know when Makoto left. I looked at my empty bag and finished the last sip of my coffee before disappearing into the crowd. Chapter 4. This was the third day that George hadn't come home. Willow took a bite of the tasteless sandwich and followed it with a sip of overly milky coffee, her brows knitting in distaste. She set the cup down with a thud, tossing the sandwich back onto the plate, and looked at the housekeeper standing nearby. "Did we change chefs? Why is the food so awful?" The housekeeper, looking troubled, hesitated for a moment before answering. "The chef hasn't been changed, miss. But all your meals have always been prepared by Mr. George himself. We're not familiar with the exact recipes he uses." Once the housekeeper started talking, she went on, recounting all the things George had done for Willow over the past 5 years. Apart from the meals, every detail of her life, her clothing, food, shelter, and daily routines, had been managed by him. Even when he occasionally went on business trips, he would take care of everything beforehand, making sure to call multiple times a day to remind the staff. Willow sat frozen, unable to process. She had never known that he had done so much, and he had never told her a word about it. Looking at the cold breakfast on the table, her mind was flooded with a whirlwind of thoughts. On the 5th day of George's absence, Willow finally realized that he had run away. She picked up her phone and, for the first time, called him. From the expansive terrace, she could see the sunset slowly sinking into the horizon, the sky gradually enveloping itself in darkness, and her heart, like the setting sun, sank little by little, growing heavier with impatience. He didn't answer the phone, not once. Willow took a deep breath, deciding to call his family. But then, she suddenly remembered that George was an orphan, his only grandmother having passed away several years ago. She scrolled through her contacts again, but after several attempts, she realized that she didn't even know who his friends were. She pushed open the door to George's room, hoping to find some clue inside, but the moment she pushed the door open, she froze in place. Though she rarely entered George's room, she had a vague memory of how it was decorated. His gentle nature meant that aside from the essential furniture, there was nothing else in the room. Now, the room was filled with all kinds of antique trinkets, luxury watches, and vibrant, colorful clothing. It was unrecognizable from the way it used to be. Just as she was about to ask the housekeeper who had rearranged the room, Makoto appeared at the top of the stairs, holding a large bouquet of roses. "Willow." The roses on the rooftop are blooming beautifully, so I picked some for you." His words faltered when he saw the darkened expression on her face. What's wrong? Makoto, where are the original things in this room?" Makoto seemed momentarily stunned, but quickly recovered. "I saw that those things were outdated, so I had the housekeeper remove them." "Willow, are you upset?" "Well, this is your and Mr. Wang's home, so of course, it's up to you what stays or goes. I'm just an outsider. Should I leave now?" His voice was choked, his eyes suddenly turning red. Hearing his faint sobs, Willow felt a strange irritation rising in her chest. George had never cried, even when she hadn't returned to the country for 3 months. Trying to help Makoto divorce his wife with a mental disorder, George had only reminded her on the phone to stay safe. Maybe she hadn't comforted herself for too long. Makoto quietly glanced up at her, only to find her lost in thought, staring at the room. He bit his lip, feeling increasingly unwilling. He had returned to the country. He was right in front of her and wasn't going anywhere. Why was she still thinking about George? The more he thought about it, the more aggrieved he became. His tears began to fall. "I shouldn't have come back. I shouldn't have stayed in his room. I'll leave now." He threw the bouquet of roses aside and turned to run out. "Makoto." Willow snapped out of her trance and hurried to chase after him. "Let go. Let me go." Makoto cried uncontrollably, his eyes filled with pain. "If it weren't for me, if I hadn't come back to the country, if I hadn't bothered you with all this, he wouldn't have been so upset." The harder he struggled, the tighter she held onto him. "What does it have to do with you? He's the one who's being unreasonable." "Unreasonable? Didn't you spoil him?" Makoto bitterly smiled. "Do you know, every time I couldn't sleep because I missed you, I would ask people in the circle about you, but every time, the reply was always that you were with him." Before he could finish, he began crying again. Willow couldn't hold back any longer and blurted out, "Why did I marry him? Others may not know, but don't you know?" Makoto, teary-eyed, stared at her in disbelief. "Was it really because of me?" Willow didn't answer, but her silence was the clearest affirmation. Makoto finally wiped away his tears. That evening, Willow specially arranged a candlelit dinner for Makoto. Willow usually didn't drink much, but tonight, for some reason, she kept refilling her glass, until her eyes started to redden. When the moment seemed right, Makoto took out the divorce agreement that George had given him. "Willow, the villa you bought for me before requires a supplementary agreement from you." Willow raised her hand to take it. She was usually a cautious person, and as she was about to open the document to read it, Makoto quickly pressed her hand down and flipped the agreement to the last page. Then he placed his hand on her head. "Willow, I'm feeling a bit unwell. Let's sign quickly and then head back." She immediately withdrew her hand from the document, checking his forehead. "Where do you feel unwell? Let me take you to the hospital." She started to put the document away, pulling him by the hand to stand up. A flash of panic crossed Makoto's eyes, and he quickly grabbed her hand and shook his head. "It's nothing serious. Just sign the paper, and we can go back." Concerned for his health, Willow stopped looking at the document, hurriedly signing where he pointed. Chapter 5. The moment she signed the papers, I knew I was free. In that instant, I actually smiled. It was a smile like a person who had been trapped in a cage for years finally finding the key. Just one more month, and once the cooling-off period ended, I would be completely free from Willow, and from the patience and silence that had bound me for the past 5 years of marriage. She signed without hesitation, decisively. I decided to take it as her way of freeing me. A week later, I received a call from the Liu family's old house. They reminded me that the annual family banquet was coming up, and as the eldest son-in-law, I had to attend. I hadn't planned on going, especially since we were about to no longer be a family. But remembering how the Liu family had helped me over the years, I agreed to attend. Even if it was the last time, I figured it was only right to return the favor. The old house was brightly lit, as though the grand banquet had never changed. Wearing a white suit, I stood in the corner, smiling and responding to the greetings from relatives. They still praised me, saying I was gentle, successful, with a good temperament and character, a man worthy of Willow. It all seemed so laughable, but I still nodded politely, exchanging pleasantries with everyone. It wasn't until I was about to head upstairs that I finally found a moment to catch my breath. I planned to slip into the annex to avoid the crowds, but as I stepped out of the main hall, a voice called out to me, "George." I turned around, and in the shadows, I saw her, Willow. She stood straight, as poised and composed as ever. "George, you're not a 3-year-old anymore. You've been gone for days, not answering your calls, not replying to messages. You've been gone for so long. If others find out, what will they think of the Liu family? Today, you must come back home." Her voice was as calm as water. It was like she was scolding a misbehaving child, logical, unquestionable. But even though she spoke so much, she never once asked, "Are you okay?" She never once said, "Why did you leave?" She wasn't unintelligent. She just never cared about me. She didn't think I would be hurt, or that I'd feel cold. She just thought, I should come back. I shouldn't embarrass her. I was about to tell her, "You've already signed the divorce agreement, Willow. We're no longer a family." but the housekeeper hurried over to call her, and before leaving, she furrowed her brows slightly and said, "I'll wait for you." As if I was just throwing a tantrum, I stood still, my lips moving, but all that came out was a bitter smile. I sighed and decided to let it go. A moment of peace by the poolside wouldn't be so bad, but as I turned to head to the pool, a hand suddenly shot out, blocking my path. "George." I looked up to see Makoto standing there, his brows furrowed, his eyes full of warning. He stared at me, his voice cold as a needle. "Didn't we agree to stop all this? What is this now?" I knew someone like you could never let go of Willow's position as her husband. I stared at him. He was so agitated, losing control, like a gambler who had finally grabbed the victory he wanted. Terrified, I'd backtrack, afraid I'd take something from him. I spoke softly, my tone calm as though it didn't belong in this confrontation. "I've signed the divorce agreement. She has signed it too. I won't interfere anymore. Don't worry. I don't care about that position anymore. Once the cooling off period ends, I'll leave." Having said that, I didn't look back at him and turned to leave the poolside. Makoto stomped his foot behind me, as if he wanted to chase me. But just then, a sharp cry suddenly sliced through the air. "Move out of the way." I instinctively looked up, and I only had time to see two children on rollerblades, speeding down the slope, straight at us. There was no time to think, no time to dodge. Bang. Everything spun, my feet slipped, and I was violently knocked into the pool. The icy, biting water enveloped me in fear and panic, pulling me under. I've always been afraid of water, a fear that has haunted me since childhood. The more I struggled, the deeper I sank, tangled by the water weeds and the relentless current. Instinctively, I waved my arms, trying to push toward the shore, but my limbs were already out of control. Each time I tried to fight, more water flooded into my throat. Cold water rushed up my nose, searing my throat and lungs with a fiery sting. I fought with every ounce of strength I had, breaking through the surface, gasping for air. My eyes flickered toward the shore, hoping for help, and there I saw her, Willow, standing at the edge. Her eyes darted between me and Makoto, just for a brief second, and then, she jumped. My heart skipped a beat, but the next second, I realized, she wasn't headed toward me, she was heading for Makoto. Without hesitation, she swam to him, pulling him out of the water. Just like so many times before, I shouldn't have been surprised. It wasn't the first time. I had merely repeated a choice she had long ago made. But this time, it was a choice of life and death. She still didn't hesitate. She would never jump into the water for me. The last bit of strength I had left slipped away. The sound of water around me grew more distant, and the light before me dimmed. It felt as if my lungs were on fire, and my head became unbearably heavy. I heard someone shouting my name, but it was already muffled, fading into nothing. All I could remember was her figure, her decisive leap into the water. Not for me. It was never for me. Chapter 6. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I finally opened my eyes again, the world before me seemed shrouded in a fog. The light was blinding, and the air was filled with noisy, cautious voices. I struggled to turn my head and saw a circle of people by the bed, Liu family elders, each one smiling at me, offering polite words like, "It's good to see you awake, rest well," and "Willow has been through a lot these days." They were smiling, but there was a distinct wariness in their tone, as if afraid I might slip away again without taking another breath. Willow was sitting beside me. Her hand quietly found mine. It was a kind of intimacy I hadn't felt in a long time. I turned to look at her. Her face was soft, even carrying a trace of an indescribable gentleness and caution. She smiled, and softly spoke. "George, I'm pregnant. We are going to have our own child." I froze. It felt like someone had dropped a bomb in my ear. "Pregnant." I repeated the word, dazed, my mind suddenly stalling, frozen for several seconds. Her hand rested on the back of mine, and I instinctively placed my hand on her abdomen. There was no visible curve yet, but I could feel the warmth, something undeniably real. My fingertips tingled. The home that I once thought I no longer belonged to, now had a little life growing in it, a life passed down through our blood. If this were before, I would probably be speechless with excitement. But now, my heart felt like an empty void, numb and blank. I didn't know what expression to show in the face of this news. Seeing my silence, Willow misunderstood my reaction. Her voice softened, as if afraid of disturbing me, or perhaps with a hint of hesitation. "I know you're upset because of the incident in the water, but the situation was so sudden. I really feared for Makoto's safety. You understand, don't you?" She said it so naturally, as if she was talking about something trivial. She still thought I was unhappy because she had saved Makoto when we fell into the water. She still didn't think she had done anything wrong, and I was too tired to explain. The breath I had been holding in for so long had already dissipated. I didn't have the strength to scold or argue anymore. I simply watched her in silence. She was still waiting for me to say something, and her eyes even held a rare tenderness. But I just slowly lifted my hand, gently pulling away the one she had been holding. "I'm tired." My voice wasn't loud, but it was unmistakably clear. "You're pregnant. Rest well." She seemed not to understand, nodding lightly. I'm fine. You rest. I'm going to check on Makoto. My eyelids fluttered slightly, but I didn't say anything else. When she finally got up and left, I slowly closed my eyes. The room grew quiet. Only the beep-beep of the medical machines and the rhythmic rise and fall of my chest breaking the silence. Willow was pregnant. The child was mine. Yet, for some reason, I felt no joy about becoming a father. Instead, I felt absurd. Because of the incident in the water and Willow's pregnancy, the entire Liu family had showered us with affection, treating us like precious treasures. Expensive supplements and treatments were constantly delivered to our room. I knew Willow was just being sentimental because of the pregnancy. For the past few days, she had hardly left my side, which made me uncomfortable. Since our marriage, we had rarely lived together. Especially after she dealt with Makoto's divorce, we became nothing more than strangers under the same roof. Now, she sat beside me, reading a document in her hands. Every breath she took was clear and audible. The thing I had once eagerly awaited had finally come to pass. But instead of joy, all I felt was a strange impatience. But since Willow was pregnant, my moral boundaries kept me from reacting as I would have otherwise. So, I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. Makoto, upon hearing from the housekeeper that Willow was pregnant, gritted his teeth, a flicker of anger stirring in his eyes. He had planned to divorce Willow and sever all ties. Now that she was pregnant, was this a ploy to keep me from leaving? That's how he thought, and that's exactly what he asked. At the time, Willow had to leave for work, giving Makoto a chance to enter my room. I acted as though I hadn't heard him, flipping through the book in my hands. My calmness seemed to irk him even more. George, I'm talking to you. I finally closed the book, looked up at him, and replied coolly, when did I ever say I wouldn't give you this position? Makoto's face showed clear surprise. He had always assumed I was only playing at divorce. Now that Willow was carrying my child, he thought my position was more secure than ever. He expected me not to want a divorce, and he found it normal. But he didn't expect me to be so resolute. What do you plan to do about the child? Makoto asked, suddenly changing his expression. You're not thinking of. I remained calm. Willow has been having people watch me. I can't find a chance to leave. You'll have to find a way to get her out of the way. Makoto agreed. Before leaving, he asked me one last question. You've endured all these years. Why are you so determined now? I remained silent for a long time, until Makoto was about to walk out, and I finally spoke up. Because I'm not happy. I had always known that Willow loved Makoto. All these years, she went abroad to see him, stayed with him, thought of him. I had endured it all. Enduring for 1 year, 5 years, a lifetime, it was all the same. I had considered just putting up with it. After all, what was the harm in enduring? Eventually, I'd get used to it, and things would get better. But at night, I couldn't sleep. My heart burned with a constant, gnawing ache. There were words that kept tumbling around in my mind. Things I couldn't suppress. I wasn't happy. Willow, these years of marriage, I've been so unhappy. A person only has 30,000 days to live. From now on, I want to live the life that belongs to George, and never again will I spend my time trying to please a woman who doesn't love me. Chapter 7. Late at night, I had just finished my shower and was sitting on the edge of the bed, drying my hair. The guest room lights were off, and the only light came from the moon outside, casting a hazy glow across the room. I heard her footsteps pause outside the door, hesitant, as if she was preparing to enter. But before I could get up, my phone rang. I didn't answer. As expected, it was her calling. But she didn't come in. A few seconds later, I heard her pick up the phone. Willow, my ex-wife is bothering me again. It was Makoto's voice. His tone was the same as always, tinged with a hint of a cry, like a child who had never grown up, always seeking refuge in front of her. A few seconds later, the call ended. I knew she would leave. As expected, a few minutes later, I heard her hurried footsteps and the sound of the housekeeper opening the door for her. When everything fell silent, I slowly put on my coat, grabbed my bag, and stepped out of the room. Her departure still lingered in my ears, clear as a saw cutting through my heart. She didn't ask where I was going, nor did she care if I would return, even though I had just been pulled out of the water, almost losing my life. Yet, all her thoughts were still with that crying man, that fool. I gently closed the door, as though I had never existed. After leaving the old house, I first went to the hospital for follow-up treatment, then took a moment to visit the rental apartment. It was a nice place, quiet, by the river, undisturbed. I locked the signed divorce agreement in the drawer. Soon, once the cooling-off period was over, I would be able to leave this long, one-sided play. She called again. Perhaps realizing I had truly disappeared, she suddenly remembered I was still around. I didn't answer, not once. From the moment she jumped into the water to save Makoto, I knew what my position was in her heart. It wasn't that I was being petty or overly sensitive. It was the truth I had finally accepted. I was just a temporary replacement in her life. Later, she seemed to have stayed with Makoto and didn't return for a while. But she did send me a text message. Makoto's ex-wife is making trouble again. so I have to stay and keep him company tonight. I'll be back in a few days. Take care of yourself while you're at home. I replied with a single word, understood. I threw my phone onto the bedside table, leaned back in the chair, and closed my eyes. I had imagined countless times what she would be like when she returned, worried, apologetic, or at least offering a stiff explanation. But she gave me nothing. She chose someone else, as naturally as ever. I didn't blame her. I simply, finally learned to let go. A week later, she returned. I was sitting in the sun on the porch swing, eyes half closed, when I heard the sound of her car door. She walked over and handed me a box. This is a gift to make up for the time I've been away. I glanced at it, said nothing, and opened it. It was a pen. I recognized it. It was part of a promotional giveaway. The real one was the custom-made pen she had given to Makoto a few days ago, the handcrafted one with his initials. Makoto had even sent me a photo, proudly boasting, "Willow truly knows me best." I said nothing, simply smiled faintly. Then I placed the pen and the box on the small table beside the chair. She didn't notice. She sat down and asked, "Why have you been so quiet lately? Are you feeling unwell?" I shook my head, smiling gently. "I'm fine. I just suddenly realized that some things, even if said, no one really listens to." She paused, a bit confused, but didn't press further. Something was off. I could feel her mood was strange, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong. She didn't rush to leave as she usually did. Instead, she sat beside me and spoke softly, as if she were discussing what to have for dinner. "Next weekend is our 5-year wedding anniversary. Let's have a wedding ceremony." I turned to look at her. Her face was calm, and there wasn't even the slightest change in her eyes as she said it. It felt as if she wasn't talking about a wedding, but just organizing some trivial dinner plans. I knew she was trying to make up for things. She thought this would make up for all the frustrations I had suffered these past months. But as I looked into her serene eyes, I couldn't bring myself to feel any joy. If this were before, I would have been upset. The kind of sadness that would wrap around me like a heavy cloud, smothering me until I couldn't breathe. But not anymore. Now, I felt nothing. It was like a stagnant pool of water. No matter how the wind or rain lashed at it, it never rippled. So I didn't say anything. Seeing that I didn't object, she took it as my agreement. Over the next few days, she personally hired a designer from France to create her wedding dress. I sat with her in the living room as she flipped through different wedding gowns on her tablet, occasionally looking up at me and asking, "Do you think this one looks good? Or would this one suit me better?" I looked at the snow-white gowns on the screen, and memories from long ago suddenly surfaced. On our wedding day, what we had really done wasn't getting married. We had merely gone to the registry office and gotten a certificate. She had received a phone call right outside the Civil Affairs Bureau. I remembered how her expression had changed suddenly, her face turning cold, and then she looked up at me and said, "Makoto's in trouble. I have to go abroad." She left in such a hurry, didn't explain a thing, and I was left standing outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, holding the bouquet I had specially ordered for her. We had promised to have a proper wedding within a month, but after Makoto's troubles, the wedding was postponed over and over. I never could bring myself to throw away that bouquet. I quietly placed it in the fridge, and only when it had withered did I throw it out. I used to think that if she ever turned back, we could still make up for it, but now, she was finally offering me a wedding, and all I felt was irony. We were about to get divorced, and yet she still thought a wedding could make up for everything. Whatever she did, it was too late. Chapter 8. 3 days before the wedding, with Willow's wedding preparations in full swing, the Liu family's old house became bustling once again. The servants were coming and going, even walking briskly, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that this noise had nothing to do with me, and in truth, it no longer did. Taking advantage of their distraction, I quietly called Makoto to the dress-fitting room and handed him the tablet. "The wedding dress is made to my measurements," I said. "Our body shapes are similar, so try it on. If something doesn't fit, you can adjust it on the tablet, and I'll have the designer make the final adjustments." He looked at me in confusion. "Isn't this your wedding? Why should I wear it?" I met his gaze, my voice flat, almost cold. "The day Willow holds her wedding. It will also be the day the divorce cooling-off period ends. I'll leave the wedding with the divorce certificate. The bride can't stand on the stage alone. You're the person she most wants to marry, so naturally, you'll take my place." I paused, letting my words sink in as I noticed the shock on his face. "Makoto, I wish you both the happiness you deserve." As I spoke those words, my voice was steady, without a hint of hesitation, and my eyes held no sorrow or regret. At that moment, I think he finally understood. I had truly let go of Willow. 2 days before the wedding, I had just gotten out of the bathroom, drying my hair as I walked toward the living room sofa. She was sitting there, her laptop on her lap, with her phone glowing beside her. I saw her brows twitch slightly, as if she noticed something. "We're getting married soon," she suddenly asked. "Why did you buy a plane ticket?" I paused for a moment, then quickly regained my composure. "Plane ticket? You must have seen something wrong. Probably just a spam message." She nodded and didn't ask further. After the lights went out, we lay on the bed, back to back. Her breathing was deep and steady, quickly falling into a peaceful sleep. I, however, lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep through the night. The day before the wedding, I pulled out the diary I had kept hidden for 5 years from the very bottom of my suitcase. The edges of the pages had worn thin, and as I flipped through it, it felt as though I was reading the story of another me, someone who had been weak, patient, and persistent. October 1st, 2019. I got married today, to the person I loved, but my bride flew abroad that night, just to see her ex wearing a groom's suit. I had been so foolish that day, willing to give her the plane ticket and send her to the airport. The tears that had stained the pages were now yellowed, and I gently ran my fingers over the page before continuing. December 30th, 2020. It was the first time someone spent New Year's Eve with me, but I wasn't happy at all. The place she took me to was his favorite bar. Did she want to spend the new year with me? Or did she just want to use me to reminisce? I think it was the latter. October 1st, 2021. Our wedding anniversary. I took her out to eat. She said the restaurant had sentimental value. Later, I found out that was where she first confessed to Makoto. August 29, 2024. Makoto has returned to the country. Her eyes have started to shine again. I know it's time to leave. The thick diary was filled with all the grievances and struggles I had endured over the past 5 years. From hopeful beginnings to daily torment. And finally, complete resignation. I once wanted so much to be loved by her, even just a little, but now, all I wanted was to leave. I picked up the pen and wrote the final words on the last page. September 31st, 2024. I've decided to leave. Willow, I don't want you anymore. I placed the diary and the divorce agreement in the drawer by the bedside. Then I stood up and gave one last look at the festive room. Turning my face, I smiled, filled with a yearning for freedom. As the clock struck, I disappeared into the vast night. Chapter 9. The day of the wedding. The ceremony hall was softly adorned with flowers and white lace, and the sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting dappled shadows on the floor. The atmosphere felt warm and romantic, adding a touch of tenderness to this sacred moment. Willow stood at the end of the rose path. What was supposed to be just a make-up wedding now had a different feel altogether. As she stepped onto the stage, she realized she was actually feeling a sense of anticipation. She had never seen George in a groom's suit before. Just the thought of herself in a wedding dress, blushing and slowly walking toward George, made her heart inexplicably race. To the sound of the music, the bride, wearing a veil, lifted her skirt and walked toward him. Mr. George, do you take Miss Lou as your wife? To love her, cherish her, respect her, accept her, and remain faithful to her in sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth, until death do you part? The groom nodded. I do. Miss Willow, do you take Mr. Wong as your husband? To love him, cherish him, respect him, accept him, and remain faithful to him in sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth, until death do you part? She nodded. I do. Amidst applause, the priest solemnly declared the couple married. A smile tugged at the corner of Willow's lips, but as the men leaned forward to lift the veil and kiss her, she suddenly clutched the veil tightly, refusing to let go. The man assumed she was shy and gently lowered his head, soothing his wife. Willow, don't be scared. At the moment she saw his face, her pupils contracted in shock. Makoto. Willow stared at him, unable to believe what she was seeing. After a moment, she composed herself, and the smile on her face quickly disappeared. She grabbed his hand firmly. Fortunately, Makoto had his back to the audience, so unless someone was sitting in the first row, they couldn't see his face. She quickly regained her composure, pulling Makoto close so he wouldn't face the gazes of the many guests. Luckily, Makoto and George were of similar stature, so few people noticed that the groom had been swapped. Willow gave an apologetic glance to the guests. I'm sorry, I'm feeling unwell and need to rest. The guests exchanged knowing looks, and the teasing ceased immediately. Only a few people who knew the truth whispered among themselves. The banquet soon began. According to tradition, after the bride and groom changed into their wedding attire, they were supposed to come down and toast the guests. However, Lou father and Lou mother waited and waited, but neither of them came downstairs. Lou mother, thinking they were probably still enjoying each other's company, decided to wait a bit longer. But as the evening grew late, and it seemed like the party was coming to a close, neither of them had shown up. She glanced at the housekeeper beside her. Go upstairs and remind the young master and miss to change and come down soon. The housekeeper nodded, turning and heading upstairs, knocking on the door of the lounge. Sir, miss, master and madam ask that you change and come down as soon as possible. The room was quiet for a long while before a woman's voice responded. Got it, you can go ahead. After the housekeeper left, Willow frowned as she looked at the men in front of her. Why is it you? Makoto's eyes reddened. Why can't it be me? Willow, are you really going to go through with this wedding with George? If it weren't for what happened back then, the person standing here marrying you would have been me. I'm just taking back what was originally mine. Chapter 10. The sound of broken sobs echoed in her ears. She looked at the man crying with his face covered, and for the first time, she didn't have the patience to comfort him. She pinched the bridge of her nose. Makoto, this is not the time for this. You need to understand. This wedding is different. It's the first time I'm publicly announcing my marriage. This is significant. My name and George's have already appeared on the front pages of various news outlets. The whole city knows he's the groom. If we suddenly change the groom now and it gets out, the consequences could be disastrous. I'm doing this for your own good. But Makoto didn't want to hear this. He only felt that her refusal to publicly announce the groom change meant she didn't love him. Willow, if you really love me, announce it now. Tell everyone the groom has changed. Otherwise, I'll leave right now. He stood up, about to leave, but she stepped in front of the door, blocking his way. He smirked, thinking, of course, she cared. She wouldn't let him leave, but the next moment, her words slapped him in the face. You can't leave now. Makoto's face darkened. What do you mean? Willow explained. If you leave now and someone sees you, the consequences will be bad. Makoto, stay here for now, and we'll talk once everyone's gone. She didn't wait for his response, just turned and left, closing the door behind her. Makoto stood there alone, his fists slowly clenching. He had always believed becoming Willow's husband was within his grasp. After all, she loved him so much, and George had created such good conditions for him. Now, he had finally replaced George and was marrying her. Once she acknowledged him in front of everyone, everyone would know he was the one she truly loved. And since Willow loved him so much, she would certainly explain everything for him. But reality gave him a harsh slap. The moment she saw his face, she quickly lowered the veil and, before he could react, pushed him up the stairs. She wouldn't even let him go downstairs to greet the guests. Chapter 11. Makoto looked at himself in the mirror. The face he once proudly admired now seemed to show the signs of age. After experiencing a failed marriage, the woman he once pursued no longer considered him a candidate for husband. Now, his only option was to hold on tightly to Willow to get back into the wealthy circle. So, how could he just meekly follow Willow's instructions? Downstairs, Willow came down alone. Mother looked at her with concern. Why are you the only one coming down? Where's George? Why is Makoto the one standing in for him on stage? Willow quickly masked her displeasure with a calm expression. Mom, you know George was in the water and has been unwell, with a fever that still hasn't gone down. So I told him to stay in his room and rest. Makoto's body type is similar to George's, so I asked him to step in for a bit. I'll go out now. Mother finally relaxed. All right, you go ahead and greet the guests. Willow nodded, picked up the wine glass, and made her way toward the banquet. A voice filled with grievance suddenly rang out behind her. Willow. The sudden cry made the guests look up, and even Lu's father and Lu's mother turned to look upstairs. She turned to face the source of the voice. Makoto stood at the top of the stairs, in a white suit, looking at her with tears in his eyes. Lu's mother's face instantly darkened. Just as she was about to signal the bodyguards to drag him away, Makoto rushed down the stairs and hugged Willow. Willow, the one marrying you today is me. Why won't you let me come down to greet the guests? Do you not love me? In just 2 sentences, the guests quickly understood the situation. Low murmurs spread through the room. Willow could no longer maintain her calm demeanor. She grabbed his hand and whispered harshly, Makoto, this is not the time for you to throw a tantrum. Chapter 12. The sound of broken sobs echoed in the air. As Willow watched the man cry with his face hidden, she felt, for the first time, no patience to comfort him. She pinched the bridge of her nose. Makoto, this is not the time for this. You need to understand. This wedding is different. It's my first time publicly announcing my marriage. It's significant. George and my names have already appeared on the front pages of newspapers. The whole city knows he's the groom. If we suddenly change the groom now, the consequences will be disastrous. I'm doing this for your own good. But Makoto didn't want to hear any of it. He felt that her refusal to publicly announce the groom switch meant she didn't love him. Willow, if you really love me, announce now that the groom has changed. Otherwise, I'm leaving right now. He stood up, ready to leave, but she stepped in front of the door, blocking his way. He smirked to himself, thinking that of course, she cared. She wouldn't let him leave, but the next moment, her words slapped him in the face. You can't leave now. Makoto's face darkened. What do you mean? Willow explained calmly. If you leave now and someone sees you, the consequences will be bad. Makoto, stay here for now. We'll talk when everyone's gone. She turned and left, closing the door behind her. Makoto stood there, alone. His fists slowly clenched. He had always believed becoming Willow's husband was a foregone conclusion. After all, she loved him so much, and George had made it so easy for him. Now, he had finally replaced George and was getting married to her. Once she acknowledged him publicly, everyone would know that he was the one she truly loved. Since Willow loved him so much, she would definitely explain things to everyone. But reality slapped him harshly in the face. The moment she saw his face, she quickly lowered the veil and, before he could react, pushed him up the stairs. She wouldn't even let him go downstairs to greet the guests. Chapter 13. Makoto's face turned pale as he peered out from Willow's embrace. Auntie, don't call me Auntie. While Willow was comforting Makoto, the housekeeper stepped forward, holding out a phone screen to her. When Lu's mother saw the news headline, she immediately lost her composure. She yanked Makoto out of Willow's arms and slapped him hard again. "Makoto, you worthless bastard. After you took my money and went abroad, you promised not to come back, and now, less than 5 years later, you've gotten involved with my daughter. Doing all these disgusting things. Are you trying to ruin us?" Willow's eyes widened as she caught the key words in Lu Mother's speech and looked at Makoto in disbelief. "You took my mom's money, Willow." "I didn't take any money," Makoto quickly denied. Lu Mother didn't bother to explain further and shoved the phone in his face. "Look at this scoundrel. See what he's done." When Willow saw the headline, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Makoto, what's going on?" Although the entire wedding ceremony and the groom change had been made known to the guests, they understood this was a family matter and wouldn't spread it outside. But now, the topic of Lu family's groom switch was trending on Weibo. Lu Mother could think of no one but Makoto who could have done something like this. Makoto looked guilty, knowing that before going downstairs, he had arranged for paparazzi to get the story out, ensuring it trended on Weibo. That way, the Lu family would have no choice but to accept him as the groom for the sake of their image. But things hadn't gone the way he had expected. Seeing him like this, Willow closed her eyes in pain. Why, Makoto? Though she had agreed to have the makeup wedding with George, it was only a way to make up for her recent neglect of him. The person she truly loved had always been Makoto. Apart from the wedding and the child, she would give him anything. But she never imagined that he would go as far as broadcasting the groom change just to pressure her into marriage. She couldn't even begin to fathom what would happen to the Lu family stock prices now. She opened her eyes and looked at the men before her, feeling a profound sense of unfamiliarity. Makoto desperately grabbed her hand, his eyes filled with uncertainty and anxiety. "Willow, let me explain. I didn't want to do this. I just love you too much." Chapter 14. Love. Lu Mother shook her aching hand, then sat back on the sofa. "If you really loved my daughter, why did you come to me for money to go abroad back then?" Willow abruptly looked up at her mother. "Mom, what do you mean?" All these years, Willow had believed her mother didn't approve of Makoto, which was why she had used money to force him to leave the country. Because of this, she had kept a distance from her mother and rarely returned to the old house, except for necessary family events. But now, the truth was that Makoto had taken the money and left on his own. The long-hidden secret had been suddenly exposed, and Makoto, pale as a ghost, collapsed onto the floor. Tears streamed down his face, but he couldn't utter a single word of explanation. "Heh." Willow gave a bitter smile, covering her face with her hand. She had suffered so much, making countless excuses for his departure, but the truth was that he had taken the money and left on his own. The innocent love she once had for him was shattered in that moment. The image of the pure, perfect boy she had once adored was now tainted. Makoto, in his anguish, cried out, "I didn't want this. I didn't want to do it, but we were just so different. I couldn't even get into your family's door. This was the only way I could do it." Rather than suffering watching the one he loved marry someone from the same social standing, he had chosen to leave first, taking the money and retreating. At the heart of it, Makoto only cared about himself. Every decision he made, every step he took, was for his own benefit. In his youth, he had taken the money to go abroad, unwilling to face having nothing. Now, to survive, he had used Willow's love to justify all the wrong things he had done. Willow walked toward him, kneeling down to face him. She looked into his eyes for the first time with resolve, and with a final, deeply emotional gaze. "Makoto, do you know, back then, I truly thought about having a future with you. Even if the whole world stood against us, I would have given up everything and taken you away." But before she could give up on herself, he had already given up on her. Fear began to rise in Makoto's eyes as he realized that something had completely left him. "Willow, Willow, Willow." The sound of his heart-wrenching cries echoed through the entire villa, but that woman simply turned and disappeared into the night without looking back. In order to quell the trending topic and calm the shareholders, Willow spent the next week at the company. Under the dim lights, her bloodshot eyes remained fixed on the computer screen, and her phone rang non-stop beside her. In the end, she slumped back in her chair, picking up the phone. "Mom." Lu Mother's calm voice came through. "Forget about the trending topics in the company for now. Your father will handle it. Right now, you need to bring him back, especially since you're still pregnant. Your grandfather's been worrying about this these past few days." Since the banquet ended late, Lu's father had gone back to his room after the ceremony and was unaware of the situation. He was older now and couldn't handle such stress, so they tried to hide the truth from him as long as possible. Her mother's reminder made Willow realize that since the wedding, the real groom hadn't appeared at all. She opened her contacts and dialed his number, but on the other end, there was only the sound of the line ringing, with no answer. She dialed several more times, but still, no one picked up. Only when she searched online did she realize that she had been blocked. Frowning, she dialed her assistant's number. "Find out where Mr. George is. How could he leave at a time like this? Hadn't he been the one most excited about the wedding?" Chapter 15. I already knew that if she truly wanted to find me, it would be effortless. The Lu family's connections and influence were not something I could easily escape. So when I pushed open the door of my apartment in a foreign land and saw that familiar yet strange figure at the foot of the stairs, I wasn't surprised. She had come. I had seen the video of the groom change at the wedding. In the footage, she was wearing the veil, hiding her emotions. While Makoto stood in for me, completing the entire ceremony, she remained as composed as ever, claiming to be unwell, which simplified the proceedings. I looked at the scene without feeling the slightest bit moved, because I had known all along she never cared about me, and now, it was the same. I stood in the doorway, looking down at her. She leaned against the car, dressed in a simple gray dress, no makeup, her hair casually tied up. She looked like a completely different person compared to the refined and perfect image she had when she was in the villa. For a moment, I even felt like she was a stranger. She spoke first. "It's been a mess long enough. Don't you think it's time to go home?" I laughed, a cold, emotionless laugh. So, to her, this marriage, this divorce, and this attempt to escape from her had only been a mess. "My grandfather has been asking about you," she added, as if to soften her tone. "Everyone is looking forward to our child." She still used others to pressure me, family, children, responsibility. But I had stopped falling for that long ago. I lowered my eyelashes, my voice light, almost casual as if discussing the weather. "Miss Liu, we're already divorced. I don't want you anymore." She froze, seemingly unable to comprehend what I had just said. After a few seconds, she let out a cynical laugh, as if she had heard a joke. "Divorce? I never signed anything. So how can you leave?" She stepped forward, grabbing my wrist firmly, her tone turning harsh. "I don't have time to argue with you here. Come back with me now. Don't you want our child to have a father?" Her grip was strong, but I remained unmoved, finding the whole situation absurd. I stared at her, slowly speaking. "If you don't believe me, you can go to the new house right now. The divorce agreement is in the drawer beside the bed, with your signature on it." Her expression froze, her brows knitting tightly. "When did I ever sign a divorce agreement? Even if I did, the family won't agree to it." As she spoke, it seemed like something clicked in her mind. She glanced down at her stomach, and her eyes softened. "Besides, I'm still pregnant. George, you can't abandon our child." I finally smiled, but the smile was colder than ice. "You're talking about the child?" I fixed my gaze on her eyes. "How can I be sure it's mine? Besides, I've seen the health report you hid in the drawer. During that time, I never even touched you." That night, she had hurriedly left the villa, and I had accidentally found the health report she had hidden away. At that moment, I felt no regret left. Her face went pale as she realized what I meant. She trembled, her voice barely audible. When did you see it?" I answered calmly. "The night you went to see Makoto. The child is yours to handle. After all, he's not mine." Her hand clenched my shoulder, her knuckles turning white, and her voice was nearly strangled with rage. "How dare you, George? How dare you?" I looked into her eyes, the same eyes that used to be so calm and high above, now filled with anger and collapse, pain, unwillingness, rage, and I felt relief. Her shock, her grievance, her anger, and a hint of panic, all of it gave me a sense of catharsis. Could her pain compare to the years of bitterness I had endured in this marriage? It didn't even matter. I slowly pried her fingers off my shoulder, laughing for the first time with genuine freedom. "What's there to be afraid of?" My voice was soft, yet each word felt like a knife, cutting through all the places she had once been indifferent to me. "A child born without blessings is destined to face nothing but hardships." When I said those words, I didn't feel cruel. I had made up my mind long ago. If this child were truly mine, I wouldn't be able to face him with a normal attitude. I didn't want another life to suffer the loneliness of having two parents, but no love. But she, with reddened eyes, shouted at me, "You said you loved me the most. Why can't you accept my child? When he's born, he'll call you Dad." I looked at her, serious, speaking each word deliberately. "If it's not my child, why should I care? Willow, are you out of your mind? Do you think no matter how much you trample on my dignity, I won't leave you?" I could feel my eyes growing red, but I couldn't control the surge of emotions. "You're pregnant. So what? As long as Makoto calls, you'll abandon me instantly, without caring if our child is in danger." "Willow, I don't want our child to ask me one day, 'Dad, why doesn't Mom come home every day?' I don't want him to experience the childhood I had. You're not qualified to be his mother, and neither am I." She stared at me, unable to say a word. I knew my words were harsh, but each one cut into the deepest pain I'd ever felt. Her hand slowly relaxed from my shoulder, and her eyes held a look of indescribable silence. She finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "Makoto and I, it's over. I'll get rid of this child." "So," I finished her sentence, sneering coldly. "Yes, it's all over, and don't ever come back." I turned to close the door, unwilling to hear another word of explanation, but at that moment, the phone rang, its shrill sound breaking the silence. Chapter 16. In the end, I returned to the country with Willow. I had thought that there would be no more ties between us, but when I heard that Lu's mother had collapsed, I couldn't bring myself to walk away. The diary and the divorce agreement I had hidden in the drawer, she had seen them. Her heart wasn't strong, and after the shock, she couldn't catch her breath and was rushed to the hospital. In the hospital room, Lou Mother's face was pale, but when she saw me, there was still warmth in her eyes. My throat tightened. I lowered my gaze and whispered, "Aunt Lou, I'm sorry." She sighed deeply, gently patting my hand. "Foolish child, there's nothing to apologize for. It's all my daughter's fault for being so inconsiderate." I remembered the first time I met her. Back then, I wore the cleanest white shirt, nervously standing before her, blushing as I greeted her. She smiled so kindly and said I was sincere and reliable, that I would definitely be successful in life. But now, the person standing in front of her was a shell, lifeless and exhausted. I knew she could see that. She had tried countless times to advise Willow, but Willow had never listened. Her heart was always with Makoto. Perhaps everything had already been destined from the very beginning. Back at the Liu family's old house, it was said that Liu's father had not gone to the hospital. He was deeply disappointed. Throughout Willow's life, she had always been his pride. Though she was small, she had always acted with maturity and responsibility. She had never made him or his wife worry, but when it came to her marriage, she acted like a child, stubbornly refusing to consider her husband's feelings. And now, things had reached this point. She had no one to blame but herself. "These days, you should avoid seeing your mother," Liu's father told Willow. "Seeing you just makes her angry. Go back to your room and think about it before you come back down." Willow went back to the new house, walking restlessly around the room. Things had turned out far beyond her expectations. The room still looked exactly as George had left it. On her vanity, the wedding ring he never wore still sat. She walked over and picked it up, noticing the thin layer of dust on the simple band from sitting there unused for so long. Looking at the ring, her mind wandered. During the makeup wedding preparations, she had taken half a day off to accompany him to pick out the wedding rings. The saleswoman had eagerly brought out a tray of rings, each one adorned with different gems that sparkled brilliantly in the light. Willow had thought that no one could resist such a large, shiny diamond. If George hadn't found one he liked, she could take him to her friend's studio, where there were even more beautiful ones. But to her surprise, George had bypassed the tray entirely and tapped on the corner of the counter, where a plain ring lay. It was cheap, without any engravings. Now, thinking back, it was clear he was already so disillusioned with the marriage that he couldn't even care to pick out a special ring. She put the ring down and sat back on the sofa, her hands running through her hair in frustration. But as she looked down, her eyes fell on the diary spread across the table. What was written inside that could make her usually calm mother so agitated that she fainted? Driven by a mix of anger and curiosity, she picked up the diary, but when she saw the first page, her hand froze. September 1st, 2019. I got married today, to the person I loved, but my bride left the very same night to go abroad, just to see her ex in a groom's suit. Perhaps it was out of frustration, or maybe out of defiance. She had deliberately chosen to get married to George on the same day she went to get her certificate with Makoto, wanting to prove to him that without him, she could live even better. But when she happened to stumble upon a photo of him wearing the groom's suit on WeChat, her frustration turned into a bitter feeling. She still wanted to see the men she loved in a groom's suit. So that night, without any excuse, she had left George right after they had gotten their marriage certificate and hurriedly gone abroad. A deep sense of guilt slowly crept into her heart. She traced her fingers over the crease left by dried tears on the page and pressed her lips into a straight line. She couldn't even begin to imagine how heartbroken he must have been, writing and crying at the same time. Chapter 17. January 2020. This was the first time someone accompanied me for New Year's Eve, but I wasn't happy at all. She brought me to the place where she had confessed to her crush. September 1st, 2021, our wedding anniversary, and I still wasn't happy. The place she chose was where her ex had married. August 2024, her ex returned to the country, and I knew it was time for me to leave. The thick diary recorded the story of a man's 5-year marriage, a journey that began with hope and anticipation, only to end in resignation and despair. During the nights when she left for Makoto, he sat under the dim light, writing down his pain in the diary. The oppressive atmosphere hung over the room, his heart feeling like it was being tightly squeezed, suffocating him. She could almost see the man, his face streaked with tears, slowly and painfully writing about his unfortunate marriage. Outside, the sunset gradually dipped behind the clouds, and countless stars began to twinkle. Under the soft light, the woman's slender hand turned the diary to the last page. August 31st, 2024, the night before the wedding. I've decided to leave. Willow, I don't want you anymore. The sound of a tear hitting the page was followed by another drop of her own tears. She touched her face, realizing she had been crying without noticing. That night, the lights in the wedding room stayed on all night. The next morning, when I saw her in the living room of the old house, I almost didn't recognize the woman who seemed to have aged years in a single night. She stood at the door, her face pale, bloodshot eyes, her lips devoid of their usual color. She looked fragile, as though she could break with a gust of wind. The look in her eyes was one I had never seen before, guilt. The housekeeper, nodding to her, said, "Good morning, miss," before turning to me. "Sir, Your room is this way. Even though we were divorced, for the sake of Lou father, the Lou family had tacitly agreed to keep everything quiet, refusing to reveal any details to outsiders. Hearing "sir" felt strangely sharp, yet it held a warmth I didn't want to admit, as though we hadn't yet reached this point. But I didn't want to respond, nor did I need to. She hesitated for a moment, as if about to call me, but I had already stepped toward the arranged room and slammed the door shut in front of her. I heard her laugh softly from outside, bitter and pale. At that moment, I didn't turn back. Later, I learned she had made a decision that day, without telling anyone. She had gone to the hospital alone. "Miss Lou, are you sure about this?" The doctor's tone was filled with reluctance. "Your health isn't great." I'm sure." She touched her stomach, where a new life had never had the chance to greet the world. As her mother had personally ended its hope, she whispered an apology to the child. And I found out much later. Recently, Willow had become a different person. The first to notice was the old housekeeper brought from the villa. In his memory, this young lady used to leave the house before dawn and would only return after dark, sometimes staying abroad for months chasing after her ex. But now, every morning when I came downstairs, she was sitting at the breakfast table, as though waiting for me. Not waiting for me, but guarding me. Her eyes always fixed on me, watching. She didn't speak, but her gaze made me uneasy. It wasn't just me, even the servants noticed the change. She had suddenly become a housewife, spending every day with nothing to do but circle around me. I couldn't understand where she found all this time, nor could I grasp what she was trying to do. Was she trying to move me? Unfortunately, it was too late for that. If it weren't for Lou mother telling me that Lou father's health had been deteriorating, I would have moved out long ago. Lou mother wanted us to pretend we were still married, to put on an act in front of Lou father and make him feel at ease. She said, apart from cooperating in front of Lou father, I could do whatever I wanted. If Willow became a nuisance, she would personally ask Lou father to send her away. At first, I intended to refuse, but then I remembered the warm smile on Lou father's face when we first met. How he handed me a red envelope and said, "You're the one Willow has chosen. You're a part of the Lou family now." In the end, I softened. I agreed to stay a little longer, to accompany him through his last days. Lou mother was overjoyed and immediately instructed the servants to prepare a room for me. I had to admit, after the divorce, my mindset had really changed. I ate well, slept soundly, and spent my days with Lou mother, sunbathing, gardening, chatting. There was only one small issue: Willow. She always watched me with eyes full of guilt. Every time I saw her, I couldn't help but shiver. How come this woman, who had never bothered to act, had suddenly turned into an actress? I started avoiding her. If she walked through the front door, I'd go around the back. If she tried to speak, I'd pretend I didn't hear her. Since returning to the country, we hadn't exchanged a single word. I had no interest, and she, perhaps, had finally learned to keep silent. Chapter 18. On the day of Lou Grandpa's 80th birthday celebration, I thought there would be no interaction between Willow and me. But, in the end, she found a way to speak to me. The banquet hall was brightly lit, with glasses clinking and laughter filling the air. I handed the prepared birthday gift to the butler beside Lou Grandpa, smiling as I respectfully said, "Grandpa, wishing you longevity and happiness." Lou Grandpa laughed heartily and said, "Good," several times in a row. "Seeing that you and Willow are living happily together, I can finally rest easy." Hearing this, my heart stirred for a moment, and I nodded. After greeting Lou father and Lou mother, I excused myself and went upstairs to rest. I thought I would quietly spend the night without saying another word to her, but as soon as I closed the door, a hand suddenly pressed against the gap. Hiss! A muffled groan came from the door being squeezed. I jumped, immediately opening the door. Willow. It was her. The smile I had still worn earlier disappeared instantly. "What are you doing?" She didn't respond but simply squeezed into the room, almost as if she intended to throw herself into my arms. Instinctively, I stepped back. "If you have something to say, just say it. Don't touch me." I didn't expect her to look so suddenly embarrassed and pained, but I simply didn't want to bear any more of her touches. She opened her mouth but couldn't get the words out. I lost patience, walking over to the door and opening it again, speaking in a cold tone, "If you have something to say, say it. If not, please leave. I need to rest." Finally, she spoke, as if summoning all her courage. "George, I want to apologize." I froze for a moment. An apology? It came out of nowhere. "What are you apologizing for?" She gave a bitter smile and shook her head. "I read the diary you kept. Only then did I realize you've been suffering so much because of me." Suffering? Hearing that word from her lips made me want to laugh. "So what?" I asked. I didn't feel angry, nor did I feel comforted. I just felt strange. Her eyes were filled with pain, as though she had finally let her guard down. "I really didn't know. During those times when I left for Makoto, you were this heartbroken. And the child, I've had it terminated. I really want to start over with you." Start over. She said it so lightly, but she would never understand what I had gone through in these 5 years. It wasn't something that could be summarized by just the word suffering. She didn't see. During countless early mornings, I sat alone in the living room, listening to the ticking of the clock, afraid to fall asleep because I might dream of her calling someone else's name. She didn't see. I sat alone at the dinner table, reheating the food over and over, just waiting for her to say, "I'm home." She didn't know. In our shared bedroom, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., counting the time until dawn. She hadn't been there for my pain, and she had no right to judge it as suffering. I stopped speaking, just looking at her seriously. She had changed. Her eyes really filled with regret, but for me, it was too late. The person who had waited for her had long died during those 5 long years. If she had only done it earlier, if only on our wedding night, she had put down her luggage and not gone abroad just to see her ex wear a wedding suit. Or maybe earlier, when we got our marriage certificate. Or even earlier, when we first met, and she smiled at me, proposing we marry. If only at that moment, she had genuinely said, "I'm sorry," perhaps I wouldn't have been trapped in this marriage for 5 long years. I wouldn't have had to wear a fake smile every day in front of the elders of the Liu family. I wouldn't have had to hold the thick diary every night, writing down my hidden sufferings and tears. Her apology came too late. It was 5 years too late, so I rejected her. She looked at me with eyes full of guilt, but I didn't spare her another glance. I simply pushed her out. "I'm tired. I don't want to hear it anymore." The door slammed shut in front of her without any hesitation. At that moment, I didn't look back. After the banquet ended, she still didn't say another word to me. She just quietly stood by my side, watching me smile and send the guests off one by one. Once the crowd had dispersed, she followed me back to the annex. As we passed the pool, I hadn't even had the chance to say anything. Suddenly, a scream cut through the air. "Move aside." I looked up abruptly. It was a deer brought as a gift during the celebration by one of the guests. After the banquet, the servants had planned to take it to the garden and secure it, but for some unknown reason, it had been startled, its antlers lowered, charging straight at me. I stood frozen, my feet stuck to the ground, my mind screaming, "Run," but my body wouldn't obey. At that moment, a strong force shoved me out of the way. "George, watch out." It was her. I turned back in a flash. I only had time to see her silhouette dive into the path of the deer's charge. Bang. Thud. She was knocked over. Her body hurled into the pool, crashing heavily against the artificial rocks. Blood blossomed in the water like a red flower, bright and blinding. Willow. Chapter 19. When Willow finally opened her eyes again, she realized she had been taken to the hospital. "George." But all she heard was Lou Mother's cold grunt. "George isn't here. It's only me." "Where's George? Is he okay? Is he all right?" She struggled to sit up, but Lou Mother was quick to push her back down. Hey, don't move. You've still got a wound on your head. Don't worry. George is fine. He just got a bit of a shock and is resting at home." Willow finally settled back down, but accidentally touched her wound. While adjusting her pillow, Lou Mother sneered, "Now you feel pain. Huh?" When George fell into the water, it was 10 times worse for him. Thinking back to the pale face of George when he was rescued, Lou Mother's heart hurt even more. She struck Willow's body a few times in frustration. "How could you? You knew George couldn't swim. Yet you left your husband to save that worthless man. Now, are you satisfied? You've lost your husband because of your tantrum." Listening to Lou Mother's complaints, Willow's heart felt even heavier. She finally understood the pain George must have gone through. She couldn't imagine how desperate he had been in that moment. Her hands clenched the blanket tighter. For the next several days, only Lou Mother came to bring her food and take care of her. Several times, Willow had wanted to see George, but in the end, she couldn't bring herself to ask. Finally, the day before she was discharged, she couldn't hold back and asked Lou Mother. But before she could say anything, Lou Mother cut her off with an eye roll. "I know what you're going to say, but forget it. George is still recovering from the shock and high fever. We're letting him rest at home. Besides, he's no longer your husband. Why should he come to see you?" "But he's still my husband," Willow began. But her words were cut short as Lou Mother slapped her on the head. "Husband? You've already signed the divorce papers. He's your ex-husband now." "But I didn't agree to it." Lou Mother rolled her eyes. Later, she had someone look into the divorce, and only then did she find out that her daughter had been tricked into signing the papers while drunk. Encouraged by Makoto, the good-for-nothing. "Who told you to drink so much that day? Serves you right." The day Willow was discharged, I was in the living room with Lou Grandpa, having tea. The moment she walked in, I saw her. We exchanged a glance for a moment. There was hesitation in her eyes, like she had something to say, but I had no intention of speaking first, and eventually, I asked, "Are you feeling better?" She nodded, but before she could speak, Lou Mother called her away. Not 2 minutes later, Lou's younger sister came up to me, smiling broadly. "Come on, let's go to the hot springs." Willow froze upon hearing this. She looked at me, but I didn't respond. actually. I had agreed to go with Lou's younger sister. She had always been kind to me, knowing I was feeling down and insisted on dragging me out for some fresh air. I thought she wouldn't follow us, but unexpectedly, with Lou's mother's and her younger sister's encouragement, Willow also nodded and said she wanted to join. She claimed she had grown tired of staying in the hospital and wanted to get some air. I didn't object. At this point, there was no point in objecting. Along the way, Lou's younger sister chattered excitedly about the plans: snow mountains, hot springs, fruit picking, bonfire parties. She was bubbling with excitement, while Willow and I occasionally muttered a response, acting like we were paying attention. But Lou's younger sister was perceptive. After a few moments, she leaned in and gave us both a suspicious look. "You two are so strange," she said. "You're clearly a married couple, yet not a single whisper to each other. You're both just talking to me." My heart sank. Thankfully, she didn't know we were already divorced. Before I could come up with a response, she suddenly clapped her hands. "I know. George, are you still mad about the groom switch at the wedding? That was definitely Willow's fault. Let her move your luggage as punishment." I was speechless. Willow, however, kept her head lowered, saying nothing. Soon enough, we arrived at the guest house. The receptionist greeted us with a warm smile and handed over the room key. I took the key and led the way, opening the door and, out of habit, gesturing for her to go in first. But when I saw the room set up, I froze. Chapter 20. When I opened the door, I saw the large bed inside, the red sheets, with two towel swans nestled together, surrounded by rose petals. I glanced at the room key in my hand, then looked around the room. Without saying a word, I turned to leave. "I'll go to the front desk and book another room." "George," she called out to me, blocking the door, her eyes anxious. "Aunt is a person who can't keep things to herself. If she finds out we're not staying in the same room, she'll definitely tell Grandpa." I raised my eyes and looked at her carefully made-up face, not moved at all. "So what? The whole family already knows that I'm still angry about you switching the groom." My voice was cold. "Not staying together makes perfect sense. So what if Grandpa knows? Didn't you cause this mess?" I stared at her. "Besides, how can a divorced couple still share a room? You might not mind, but I find it disgusting." She froze as if I had slapped her. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I didn't want to look at her anymore, so I bypassed her and walked straight to the front desk to switch rooms. When I came out after changing rooms, my aunt was already coming out, wrapped in a blanket, freshly changed. She looked at us walking out of separate rooms, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes, but she said nothing. She probably already guessed what was going on. We had booked a private hot spring, with only a bamboo fence separating the male and female baths. As I sank into the hot water, I felt my whole body relax. The warm water seemed to gradually dissolve all the fatigue and tension that had built up inside me. I closed my eyes and exhaled deeply. Willow wasn't with us in the same pool. Maybe she felt awkward about it. It was fine by me. I enjoyed the quiet. My aunt was in the other pool, chatting casually with me while rubbing her shoulders. Somehow, the conversation shifted to her niece. "George, have you never thought about giving Willow a chance to make things right?" She had lived abroad for many years and didn't know much about our situation. Only the surface-level news about the groom switch and the lost child. She spoke carefully, with a bit of probing. I didn't open my eyes but muttered vaguely, "Let's talk about it later." But I knew it was just a deflection, because I didn't want to give her the later anymore. The sound of water stopped suddenly from the other side, and I guessed she had heard it. I didn't say anything more. After the hot spring, we went to the guesthouse restaurant at the foot of the mountain for dinner. It was a buffet, each person with a tray. She walked behind me, constantly recommending various dishes. "This one is delicious. I think you've tried this before." "I'm allergic." "What about this one? You didn't like spicy food before, but this one isn't spicy." "I don't like it," I answered briefly and coldly, showing no courtesy. Her expression dimmed noticeably. I didn't care, just kept walking forward. After I sat down with my tray, my aunt suddenly tapped Willow on the back. "What's going on with you? Don't tell me after 5 years of marriage, you still don't know his dislikes." I heard her sigh softly, but she didn't respond. I knew what she wanted to say. She knew nothing. We had been married for 5 years, yet she never cared about what I liked, what I was allergic to. The dinner table was always filled with food she and Makoto loved. For me, it didn't matter what I ate, who I loved, whether I was in pain or not. I ate slowly, as if chewing through the 5 years of tolerance. Afterward, my aunt suggested we go to the guesthouse's ski resort, but we were told it was temporarily closed due to weather. She changed her mind and decided to take us to the guesthouse's bar to have some fun. However, halfway there, she got a call and was called away. In the large, dimly lit bar, it was just me and Willow. I decided to stop pretending, threw off my jacket, and walked towards the dance floor. I was only wearing a black tank top, fitted, breathable, showcasing my muscle lines. I knew this outfit would attract attention. I wanted her to feel uncomfortable. She kept staring at me, and I could feel her gaze burning. As soon as I stepped into the rhythm of the dance, I heard her footsteps behind me. A jacket was draped over my shoulders, but I didn't take it, just gently stepped aside. Her hands missed me. George, she called out angrily. Chapter 21. Willow, we're divorced. You have no right to control me. I tried to pull my hand away from her tight grip, but she seemed to have lost all reason, refusing to let go, her strength surprisingly intense, as though she wanted to tear something out of my bones. How could you dress like this? Her voice trembled, her eyes filled with uncontrolled anger, but I just found it ridiculous. What did she still think I was? Her husband, her possession, the man in a suit for 5 years, obedient and gentle, buttoned all the way to the top like some tool. I wasn't that man anymore. What I wore, what I did, had nothing to do with her anymore. I coldly stared at her, my voice low and icy. Let go. She didn't budge, so I repeated, Willow, you don't have the right anymore. Her eyes reddened, and I could see she was on the verge of breaking down. Then, she unexpectedly grabbed me and tried to drag me towards the door. I struggled. Are you out of your mind? Slap. A loud slap landed on my face without warning. The sting on my face took me by surprise, and I froze for a second. She froze too, as though she couldn't believe she had actually slapped me. She touched the red mark on my face, her expression softening for a moment, then turning to pain. You're dressed like this. What if someone sees us? What will Lou family think? What will Grandpa say? Enough. I pushed her hand off me, laughing coldly. If you're unhappy, just say it. Don't use the Lou family's reputation to pressure me. Willow, you're pathetic. Do you think I care? We might as well publicly announce our divorce. I don't care. I saw her eyes become hollow, her entire demeanor deflating as if she were a deflated balloon, her shoulders slumping. I knew I had been harsh, but I really didn't want to pretend or endure anymore. In a low voice, I continued, those rumors, Grandpa, Mom and Dad don't care about what I wear. From the day I entered the Lou family, they told me how I dress, how I live, everything's my decision. Back then, because of you, I chose to tone it down. She understood immediately what I meant, but she didn't respond. I told her I was free now, and she should no longer interfere with my freedom. I turned and walked toward the dance floor. Behind me, I heard her softly gasp, but I didn't look back. At dinner, neither of us said a word. My aunt kept an eye on us, nibbling on cod and looking like she was waiting for some drama to unfold. Are you two fighting again when I'm not around? She mumbled with a mouthful of fish. Willow, did you make George angry again? We remained silent. My aunt sighed. Young people these days, no patience at all in marriage. I didn't want her to keep questioning, so I picked up my juice and handed it to her. Aunt, it's really fine. She glanced at me suspiciously but didn't ask any more questions. When I returned to the room and shut the door, I heard a loud smack from outside. Soon after, Willow was dragged into my aunt's room. I didn't go after them, but I could imagine how helpless she must be at that moment. Sure enough, it wasn't long before my aunt started yelling at her. What have you done while I've been away? Since we got here, I haven't seen George genuinely smile once. I should have never brought you here. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the scolding outside, and suddenly felt so tired. This marriage had truly become a joke. I once thought that if I tried hard enough, she would eventually love me. Now, I know it wasn't that I wasn't trying hard enough. It was that she never intended to look back at me. Chapter 22. My aunt scolded me fiercely, slapping Willow's back several times before she would stop. 5 years of marriage, leaving your husband at home all alone for 5 years. What's the difference between that and being a widow? How could you be so heartless? What kind of magic did Makoto put into your head? He deserves to be rid of you. I stood outside the door, my hand on the doorknob, hearing every word clearly. Her voice echoed through the hallway, each word hitting my chest like a hammer. I told you, you never liked to go out and have fun. And now you're all of a sudden insisting on coming with us to the hot springs. What? Trying to win your husband back? Dream on. If it were me, I'd have just walked out. Only George has the patience to stay and accompany you so kindly. Yes, my temper is indeed good. For 5 years, I endured every time she left me for Makoto, putting up with her indifference, neglect, and lack of concern. I never made a scene, never argued. Even when it came to divorce, I couldn't be bothered to confront her face to face. I just had Makoto take the signed agreement to her, tricking her into signing it while she was drunk. Back then, I knew her all too well. She had never truly cared about me, so even after she signed it, she didn't remember. Just like she never remembered what I liked to eat, what I hated, or what I was allergic to. I didn't hate her. I was just too tired. Even now, she still thinks I came on this trip to play the role of her husband. She has no idea I'm no longer that. That night, I hardly slept, watching as the sky gradually lightened. When I opened the door the next morning, I was greeted by 2 pairs of panda eyes. I raised an eyebrow. What's going on with you guys? My aunt laughed awkwardly and waved her hand. Nothing. I just dragged her into watching a scary movie last night. I didn't expose her, nor did I ask further. I strapped on my ski gear and hopped onto the snowcat heading to the ski resort. The snowflakes glistened in the sunlight like scattered stars across the sky, falling to the ground. I wore a white ski suit, black goggles, and stood at the top of the mountain. The silence was deafening, with only the wind howling in my ears. I gripped my ski poles tightly and leaped down the slope. Facing the wind, I spun in the air and landed smoothly. My aunt came sliding from the other side, absolutely thrilled. "George, you're really good at skiing," I smiled. I learned a bit before, but what she didn't know was that I had learned all of this for Willow. Back then, I had asked the butler to find out what activities she liked, and when I learned she liked skiing, I plunged straight into the slopes. I fell countless times, so cold that my face froze, learning again and again, all for the day when Willow might agree to join me. But on that day, just as I finished a run, eagerly waiting for her to see me, Makoto's phone call whisked her away. She didn't even say goodbye. I stood there on the snow, watching her retreating figure, feeling empty, like the last trace of loneliness left on a snow-capped mountain. After that, I never touched skiing again. Now, picking up the ski poles again, it felt unfamiliar. I'd almost forgotten the things the instructor had told me, so I didn't hear the faint crack from the deep snow. The snow began to crack as I skied, but the next second, the sound of wind changed, and the ground started to tremble slightly. It was as if some giant beast was awakening within the mountain. "Avalanche!" Someone shouted from the distance. Everyone started running in all directions, looking for cover. I quickly looked up and saw a white wave of snow, like a tsunami, rushing down the mountainside. It was violent, rapid, and unstoppable. It felt like the whole mountain was howling, trying to swallow everything. My heart clenched. Without thinking, I turned and skied toward the nearest forest, but it was too late. The white wave, almost alive, came surging after me. This was the first avalanche I had ever experienced. When I realized what was happening, the snow came at me like a flood. I stood there, frozen, as if this sudden natural force had stunned me, unable to move. "George!" A shout rang out, and in the next second, a dark figure lunged at me, pinning me to the ground. "Lean forward. Cover your nose and mouth with your hands to prevent snow from entering your airways." It was her voice, calm but slightly trembling, ringing in my ears. I instinctively followed her instructions, and in the next moment, snow buried us. After the deafening roar, the snow finally stopped. Willow pushed herself up and started helping us remove our bulky ski gear. I cooperated, but my heart felt hollow. She didn't say a word, as if she was already used to handling everything swiftly in the midst of a crisis. We tried to recall the location of the avalanche, remember where we were, and distinguish between up and down as we attempted to dig ourselves out. But the snow was too deep, too thick, and our hands quickly went numb from the cold. We dug for a long time, but we couldn't see a glimmer of light. The temperature dropped sharply, and our limbs grew stiff. I had to rely on her warmth, staying close to her. She was afraid I'd fall asleep, so she kept talking to me about the past, about the years we were married. Things she had never mentioned before. The old me would have thought of this as gentleness, as a way for her to try to connect with me. But now, my heart was as cold and hard as the snow around me. Seeing my lack of response, she actually smiled and said, almost in self-mockery, "Well, we've been through this avalanche together. Guess we've almost died once." I turned my head, replying emotionlessly, "If anyone's going to die, it's you." "I don't want to die." She laughed softly, as if my words hadn't hurt her. Chapter 23. I could feel my fingers growing stiffer, frost accumulating on my eyelashes, pressing heavily on my eyelids. Every movement felt like gears frozen in place, slow and heavy. Suddenly, Willow's face changed, and in the next moment, she tightly held me in her arms. I rested against her chest, hearing her trembling yet calm voice repeatedly in my ear. "George, please, hang on. Don't sleep. Whatever you do, don't sleep." She slapped my face while her body provided warmth, but I really couldn't hold on much longer. My consciousness began to drift, my vision blurred as though submerged in snowmelt. Just before I closed my eyes, I heard the sound of the thick snow being violently dug open. A beam of light finally broke through the darkness. "We found him. He's here." When I opened my eyes again, I saw a bright light above me, so intense that I had to shield my eyes with my hand. My arm was numb, and my eyelids felt heavy. My aunt excitedly called for the doctor. I heard her urgently explaining the situation, because the only road out of town was temporarily blocked by the avalanche. We would be stranded in the small town for a few days. The doctor arrived, examined me, and said I was fine, only suffering from mild frostbite and low temperature reactions. But fortunately, the rescue had been timely. Seeing that I had just woken up, my aunt dropped a rest well and left a thermos of porridge beside me. She tiptoed out, leaving me alone. I leaned back against the bed, looking out at the dark sky and falling snow. But my mood felt inexplicably heavy. Actually, I had known during the avalanche. I knew Willow was genuinely afraid of me dying. She jumped in front of me to block the snow, held me tightly under the ice and snow, slapped my face as my consciousness faded, trying to give me warmth. In that moment, my heart really did warm. But so what? What came to mind were the nights over the past 5 years. She wasn't home. I sat alone in the empty house, listening to the ticking of the clock. I had gotten used to her busy work and her last-minute business trips, and I had gotten used to the crush photos and itineraries on her phone. I sipped my tea, but it felt cold. I wrapped myself in a blanket, but still felt cold. I looked at the wedding anniversary vase she had prepared for me in the corner, thinking about how she had canceled again. That kind of cold spread from my heart into my bones. I looked down at my left hand. There was a deep mark on my ring finger, the result of wearing a wedding ring for years. The day I received the signed divorce agreement from her, I didn't hesitate for a second to throw the ring into the water basin in the yard. No hesitation, no struggle. I had finally climbed out of the prison of this 5-year marriage. How could I ever go back? She did many things. Yes, saved my life, kept vigil, lowered her stance, said she regretted it, but I didn't want to go back anymore. At that moment, the door knocked. "George," her voice called out. I didn't show too much indifference. After all, she had saved my life. I nodded. "Thank you." She came in and sat down at the edge of the bed. I could tell she wanted to say, "We're still married." But in the end, she just said, "It's my duty to save you." I didn't respond, only looked out at the snowy sky. She continued, telling me how our trip had been interrupted by the avalanche, and the roads would be temporarily closed. In other words, we would be stuck in this small town for a few more days. I lightly closed my eyes and said in a calm tone, "Okay, now." I wouldn't argue, question, or fight. She could no longer guess what I was thinking. Fortunately, the town's signal tower was quickly repaired, and Willow immediately contacted home to report our safety. But we still couldn't leave, because of the snow accumulated from the avalanche. The only road out of town would take 3 more days to be cleared. Additionally, I hadn't fully recovered, and the doctor advised me to rest, so we decided to stay for a few more days. She stood by the bed explaining these things to me, and as I listened, my stomach suddenly growled. How awkward. I had forgotten that I hadn't had a single drop of water since waking up. Just as I was about to pour myself some porridge from the thermos on the bedside table, a hand beat me to it. She expertly lifted the lid and poured me a bowl. The steaming millet porridge rose from the white porcelain spoon, the vapor blurring her face, and blurring the distance between us as well. She held the bowl, scooping a spoonful and offering it to me. I didn't open my mouth or move. I just quietly watched her. "You've just woken up. You need to eat something to regain your strength." Her voice was soft, carrying a long-lost gentleness. I raised my hand and pointed at the steaming porridge. "It's so hot. How am I supposed to eat it?" She froze for a moment before realizing what I meant. She pulled back the spoon and carefully blew on it a few times. I hadn't expected her to have the patience for these things. She used to insist on having the perfect temperature for her tea before she'd drink it. When she handed the porridge to me again, it wasn't hot anymore. I didn't refuse this time. One spoonful after another, the warm millet porridge slid down my throat, warming my stomach. Yet my head began to feel heavy, and I leaned back against the headboard, my eyelids growing so heavy I could barely keep them open. Just as I was about to close my eyes, she suddenly took my hand. "George." Her voice was soft but carried a seriousness and hope I hadn't heard before. "Can you, for the sake of the avalanche, give me a chance to make up for everything? A chance to win you back?" I snapped awake. I opened my eyes and looked at her, pausing for a moment. I had originally planned to say, "We're done," but suddenly, a thought popped into my mind. I looked at her face, and a faint smile slowly curled at the corners of my lips. "Let's talk about it later. I'm tired." Her eyes lit up, as though she had just found something precious, and she immediately stood up, pulling the blanket up over me. Okay, you rest. I won't disturb you." When the door gently closed behind her, the room fell silent once again. I opened my eyes. There was no trace of sleepiness left. My lips curled into a small, ironic smile. "Win me back, Willow. This game has only just begun." Chapter 24. Her words, "Give me a chance to win you back," had a sharp effect on Willow, almost like acupuncture, jolting her back into action. From that moment on, she began to hover around me again, as if things had gone back to how they were before, even more intensively than before. My aunt, seeing our relationship warming up, naturally looked pleased, but I could tell that, after Willow turned away, she noticed the sarcasm and coldness in my eyes. She didn't say anything, probably thinking I needed to get things off my chest slowly. On the way back, after the last suitcase was thrown into the trunk, the 3 of us set off for home. Willow appeared to be in an unusually good mood, her smile evident on her face. When I pulled my hand away from hers as she tried to hold it, she just giggled and kept sticking to me, as if the colder I was, the more hope she felt. I ignored her. The Liu couple had already received my aunt's good news and were standing at the door waiting. They immediately noticed how she was doting on me. The pity and guilt in their eyes were impossible to hide. To ward off bad luck, they had organized a small gathering. The dinner party had many guests, but Willow and I silently agreed. The show must go on. After the dinner, we went back to the annex together. She followed me inside, attempting to step into my room. I blocked her. "What do you think you're doing?" She froze, seemingly unsure of how to respond. But I spoke first. Willow, I did say I'd give you a chance to win me back, but I never said we'd be sharing a room. I paused, looking straight into her eyes. Willow, we are in a state of divorce. Then, bang, I shut the door, without hesitation. I leaned against the door and listened for a while, knowing she hadn't left. She stood there for a while, likely recalling something, and then quietly walked away, just as I had expected. Not long after, she opened her browser, searching how to win back a man's heart. The first result was, give him an unforgettable birthday. Ha, how ironic. I knew she must have noticed that my birthday was this weekend. She probably also remembered how she had missed it last year, when she went to pick up Makoto from the airport. Not even looking back. That night, I sat alone in a French restaurant, waiting for 6 hours. The exquisite dishes were reheated again and again. The ice cream cakes replaced multiple times. But in the end, I ate the first bite alone and quietly asked the waiter to pack up the rest. At that moment, I knew this marriage was probably only real for me. This year, she tried to change. She had already booked the highest floor restaurant with a view, prepared flowers and dishes I liked, and even had the sapphire watch she bought at the auction ready. But sadly, the guest of honor didn't show up. It wasn't that I didn't want to go, but my aunt had forced me to play mahjong all night, blocking my way out, even taking my phone. I picked up my phone, intending to send a message, even if just something like, something came up, I'll be there a little later. My aunt held my hand down with a cold laugh. George, do you remember how you spent your birthday last year? She went to pick up Makoto, leaving you alone at the restaurant till closing time. If she could make you wait 5 years, what's one more night for her to wait for you? My fingers, gripping the phone, turned white, but in the end, I put it down. Yeah, what's the harm in making her wait? Last year, I waited for her 5 hours. This year, it was her turn to wait for me. The next day, I got up as usual, pretending nothing had happened. When she returned to the annex, my room had already been dark. I didn't touch the birthday gifts she had prepared for me. All I heard was the faint sound outside, the soft thud of her placing the watch box at the door, her quiet voice saying, George, happy birthday. Chapter 25. After her failure this time, Willow didn't get discouraged. In fact, she seemed more energized than ever, her determination to win me back growing even stronger. She continued to follow me around, like an inseparable shadow. I was really getting frustrated, thinking of finding some excuse to get rid of her for a few days, to have some peace. Before I could think of a suitable excuse, she collapsed first. After days of chasing me and wearing herself out, she finally couldn't take it anymore. Her face turned pale, and she curled up in bed, looking so fragile, as if a gust of wind could blow her away. Lou Mother originally planned to hire a servant to take care of her, but when Willow started running a fever, her temper flared up, and she insisted that I be the one to take care of her, saying no one else would do. Lou Mother was furious, stamping her feet. She grabbed a fan and smacked it against Willow's leg. He's not even your husband. Why should he take care of you? If you want to drink it, fine. If not, just lie there and suffer. With that, she slammed the bowl of porridge on the bedside table and stormed off. At that moment, I walked in, and our eyes met. Lou Mother's angry glare. Lou Aunt, it's okay, I said. I'll take care of her. She paused for a moment, then sighed and shook her head as she left. With the door closed, I walked over to her bedside, set up the tray, and placed the steaming porridge in front of her. She looked up at me with pitiful eyes. George. I crossed my arms and looked down at her. You're not crippled. You can feed yourself. She pouted, looking utterly wronged. But in the end, she obediently picked up the spoon and started eating the porridge. I watched her eat for a while, then suddenly spoke. Willow. She froze for a moment, looking up at me with a wary look in her eyes. Do you remember that night you left me to go find Makoto? I was also running a fever, just like you are now. But no one took care of me. I stared at the shock in her eyes, speaking slowly, each word cold and deliberate. That was when I found out you were pregnant. I had already decided to walk away, but in that moment, I softened. But when I looked down and saw the date on the test report, that child, the timing didn't add up. I smiled, a cold smile that even I didn't want to feel again. Do you know what I thought? I thought, even if it wasn't mine, I'd still accept it if you were willing to come back to me. But what did you do? When you found out I knew the truth, you still wanted me to be that child's father. Willow, what do you take me for? A simp? For Makoto? You didn't care about the child in your belly, running off to meet him in the middle of the night. Do you think I'd willingly raise someone else's child? If you hadn't left, if you had even just opened the door and looked at me, you would have seen me sitting there, looking at the report, and how pale my face was. I didn't look up at her as I spoke. I was afraid that if I saw any trace of guilt in her eyes, I'd soften and lose control. But then I heard her voice, low and filled with hesitation. George. I still looked up. Her face was even paler, her lips trembling, her eyes filled with panic. She truly had never thought that one day I would stop loving her. She had always thought that I would be like before, standing still, No matter how many times she hurt me, left me, or broke her promises, I would always smile and open my arms to welcome her back. She thought too highly of herself, I said coldly. So, stop being so melodramatic. I had endured for 5 years. What were these little grievances compared to that? Perhaps my words had finally made her snap out of it, for after that, she obediently took her medicine as the doctor instructed, even accepting the bitter herbal concoctions she had always hated. But as soon as she recovered, she was back at it, following me around again, just like before. I looked at her, day by day, sticking to me, but it wasn't surprising. After all, this was the first time she was trying in this relationship, while I had already let go. I thought things would continue like this until she gave up, or until I truly left, but all of that was interrupted by a phone call. On the other end, Lou Mother's exhausted and low voice reached my ears. Old Master wants to return to Guizhou and settle down there. I was taken aback. Guizhou was the place where he fought in his youth. I remembered him saying countless times while sitting in his lounge chair, gazing southward with a sigh, it would be nice to be buried with my comrades one day. I hadn't realized at the time that he was serious. He had told me that one by one, his comrades had been laid to rest in those mountains, and now, he too wanted to join them. Lou Father and Lou Mother naturally disagreed. They had taken care of the Old Master with such hard work over the years, and none of them wanted to part with him. But his mind was made up, and no one could change it. Eventually, Lou Father and Lou Mother had no choice but to compromise, deciding to accompany him. The family business, the company, and all matters were handed over to Willow. The night before they left, the Old Master called each of us into his room. He sat in his familiar rattan chair on the balcony, the setting sun casting a warm glow on his silhouette. George. He reached out his hand to me. My nose suddenly felt tight. In that moment, I was transported back more than 10 years. Back then, I had just come from the countryside, embarrassed and shy, too timid to speak a word, standing in the corner like a student who had made a mistake. It was him who waved me over, saying, "Come, sit here." In that moment, he pulled me into this family, pulling me into the light. I walked over and sat beside him, holding his hand, now marked with veins from age. I whispered, "Grandfather." He patted my hand, his smile kind, but there was an unmistakable sadness in it. "For these 5 years, I've made you suffer," he said. My eyes suddenly turned red. Tears flowed freely, as though they had finally found their escape, and I couldn't stop them. "I know my granddaughter has a bad temper," he continued. "Let me apologize to you on her behalf." I shook my head vigorously, but no words came out. He sighed, his expression calm but determined. "You shouldn't be pretending to get along just to please this old man," he said. "You've divorced, but you're still living under the same roof." I froze, looking up at him. "Grandfather, how did you know?" He snorted lightly, smiling knowingly. "Your little tricks might fool others, but they won't fool me." I was speechless. He continued, "After all the grievances you've endured, how can you still keep going?" I opened my mouth, but he waved his hand, cutting me off. "There's no but about it. I know you two are pretending to be happy in front of me just to please me. I was happy, too," he said, his voice softening. "But I've lived so long that I've realized one thing. When you're old, it's not about having your children and grandchildren around you, making noise and fussing. It's about seeing all of you well, truly happy from the bottom of your hearts." He paused, watching the hesitation in my eyes, then added with a smile, "If you're really afraid she'll keep clinging to you, I'll just take her with me." Chapter 26. I forced a smile, not saying anything more. Before leaving, Old Master Lou handed me a red envelope, and at that moment, my nose grew tight again. The words he said were something I would never forget. "George, be safe and sound." It was exactly the same as the first time I came to the Lou family. Back then, I was poor, my steps light, afraid to make too much noise. It was he who reached out to me, saying those words. This time, I still took the envelope and nodded, more heavily than before. When I turned to open the door, Willow stood up from the doorway, her face full of concern. She saw my red eyes and was about to ask me what happened when the Old Master's cold voice came from the room, making my heart shiver. "Willow, come in." I stood by the door, watching her hesitate for a moment, then lower her head and walk in. The door slammed shut with a thud. "Grandfather." Willow was about to sit next to Old Master Lou, but his expression darkened. "Sit, kneel." Willow didn't dare to defy him, kneeling straight in front of him. Old Master Lou sat up and looked at her. "I've known about your divorce with George for a while now, Grandfather." She looked up at him, surprised. "You knew?" "Heh, just like your father did when he chased after your mother." Back then, Lou Father and Lou Mother had only a minor misunderstanding, and since Lou Father had a way with words, they reconciled. But unlike them, Willow had clearly hurt George for 5 whole years. "If you didn't like him, why didn't you just say it from the start? Why did you push him away, only to regret it later? Now you want to win him back. Dream on." A bad premonition surged in Willow's heart, and her pulse quickened, as if something had flown out of her heart completely. "You've let him down for 5 years, leaving him with an empty house. Now, just because you've suffered a little and faced a little hardship, why do you think you deserve to get him back? George is such a good man. He shouldn't have to continue with you. No, no, grandfather. She was in a panic, her hands trembling, desperate to explain. I truly know I was wrong. I really want to win him back. I do love him. Willow. For the first time, Old Master Lu spoke her full name seriously. It's too late for your regret. I've already made up my mind. I've spoken to your parents. George will be recognized as my godson, and your parents will accept him as their godson. The words hit her like a bolt from the blue, and her mind went completely blank. So, from now on, George is your brother. Old Master Lu was never one to back down from a decision. Soon, the news of Willow and my divorce spread throughout a city. Just as they were preparing to rejoice in our downfall, another bombshell news hit them like a whirlwind. The Lu family was going to recognize me as their godson. Lu mother, with a nostalgic look, grabbed my hand. When I first met you, I wanted to make you my godson. I didn't expect my daughter to get ahead of me, but it's not too late now. I smiled back at her, the close bond between mother and son making others envious. In the corner, Willow stared at me with eyes full of pain and frustration. Why? Why did it turn out this way? She had been so close to winning back her husband, but now, she couldn't help but cry out in anguish. After the banquet, I cheerfully gathered the gifts people had given me and was about to return to my room. Just as I was about to open the door, I was pulled into an embrace that reeked of alcohol. The gifts in my arms clattered to the floor. I was about to call for help when the person behind me covered my mouth. George, it's me. With a click, the light in the room was turned on. I looked at the person in front of me and sneered. It's so late. Little sister, what do you need from me? Hearing the word little sister, Willow seemed to be triggered. She shoved me against the wall, her eyes red. Please, George, don't call me that. I'm still your wife. You're my husband, not my brother. Smack. I slapped her across the face. You're drunk, talking nonsense. I've always been your brother. With that, I shoved her away and tried to push her out of the room. But in the next moment, a searing kiss landed on my lips. Chapter 27. Willow. Before I could push her off me, the door was suddenly slammed open. Lu mother stood at the doorway, holding a cup of warm milk. When she saw the scene before her, her face turned pale. She rushed forward, grabbing Willow and delivering a sharp slap across her face. Why are you acting like a drunk fool? I took the opportunity to step behind Lu mother, raising my hand to viciously wipe the taste off my lips, filled with nothing but disgust. But in that moment, I saw her eyes shatter. She stood there, stunned, slowly turning her head back, her expression blank, as if she had lost control and was on the verge of breaking down. I'm not crazy. She dropped to her knees, pounding the floor with clenched fists, like a child with nowhere to turn. He could have been my husband again. Why are you turning him into my brother? I was so close, just a little bit more. I just needed to try a bit harder. We could have gotten back together. Her voice was hoarse, her tears mixing with the alcohol that had soaked her cheeks. She looked so miserable and pathetic, nothing like the proud Miss Lu from before. I looked at her, unable to stop myself from speaking. Willow, from the very beginning, I never intended to remarry you. It was like a knife had pierced her, and she finally broke down, her sobs racking her body. But you gave me a chance. Didn't you say, let's talk later? I thought you forgave me. I love you so much. I chuckled lowly, my throat tight, but I still said it. That chance was a lie, giving you hope, then disappointing you. This is what those 5 years taught me. I waited for you for 5 years. I stared at her, my gaze cold. Every time, you promised you'd come to see me, but in the end, for Makoto, you'd leave with just one phone call. What I did today was simply give back what you gave. She looked at me, her face drained of color. I continued. You say you love me. 5 years of marriage, and I never heard you say I love you once. Now that we're divorced, you start saying you love me. Willow, don't you think you're pathetic? I smiled as I said it, but inside, I had never been this clear-headed. When I gave you my heart, you trampled on it. Now that I've given up, you come back to play the game of a lost soul returning. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to say something. I looked at her, as if she was a complete stranger. Slowly, I spoke. All you've ever loved, from the start to the end, is the one person you couldn't have. I am the only thing in your chaotic life that you couldn't control. Dreams and reality, flowers and thorns, those were your choices. She shook her head, her tears uncontrollably falling. No, George, I love you. Really, after you left, I thought a lot. I really understand now, but I don't love you anymore. I said it softly, but it felt like a final verdict. She froze, her entire being seemingly emptied. I took a step toward her, looking down at her with no emotion in my eyes. I won't marry you again. I won't love you again. We can only be siblings. This is not a joke. Not out of anger, it's my final decision. She staggered back a step, as if she had lost all her support. In that moment, I watched the light in her eyes slowly fade away, her face turning dull and gray, but I felt no pity. Please, don't come and disturb me again. I paused, my gaze colder than ever. as if I had severed all ties. After all, I'm your brother, and you're my sister. That's all there is. With that, I turned and walked away without looking back. Behind me, I heard Lou Mother's heavy sigh. When you had the chance to cherish him, you didn't. What good is crying now? I didn't turn back. Later, I heard that Willow's actions while drunk, touching and trying to get physical with me, had reached old Master Lou's ears, and he was furious. He immediately made a decision. Lou Father and Lou Mother would stay in a city to manage the family business, while Willow had to go with him to Guizhou, far away from all the trouble. Willow tried to resist, but the result was 2 hard lashes from Lou Father. I didn't see her while she was being beaten, but I knew that. Before they left, Lou Father only said one thing to her: "Don't act cheap." It was a beautiful day. The sky was clear, like a freshly cleaned glass window, with no shadows. It was also the one day in my long life that I felt truly at ease. We, along with the rest of the family, escorted old Master Lou and Willow to the boarding gate for their final goodbye. I stood on the edge of the crowd, catching a glimpse of her in my peripheral vision. She was standing next to old Master Lou, with a small cut on her lip and a bandage on her forehead. She looked quiet, even lonely. I sighed softly and stepped forward, walking up to her. "Willow." She looked up at me, her eyes lifeless and still, but her lips forced a small smile. Can you give me a hug?" I opened my arms and gently pulled her into an embrace. 5 years of marriage, and not a single proper hug. Now, in this moment, I found I didn't feel much at all. It was like an old wound that finally stopped hurting, leaving behind just a dull sensation. She stayed in my arms for a few seconds before slowly pulling away. She didn't say anything, just reached into my pocket and placed something inside. Then she turned around. Without looking back, she walked towards the boarding gate. I stood there, motionless, and reached into my pocket to pull out the small note. It only had one word written on it: "Goodbye." I whispered the words to myself: "Never again."